The Last Command was released in April of 1993, and following in the footsteps of its predecessor, Dark Force Rising, it did very well, but not as well as Heir to the Empire did. It ultimately made it to number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list for 3 straight weeks, from April 25th of 1993 to May 9th of 1993, and altogether was on the New York Times bestseller list for 12 weeks. And once again, Bantam was pretty confident that it would sell, because the list price has once again gone up even further from the $18.50 list price on Dark Force Rising. This time around, it was $21.95. So, my recollections of the plot. I don't know what it says about me that in all of the books of Thrawn's trilogy, I remember the second half and not the first half. That was mostly true in this one, in that I remembered the showdown on Wayland and the fight at the Bill Brinney shipyards, but I did remember a little bit from earlier in the book, most importantly being the kidnapping attempt on Leia and her children. So, a brief summary. After dithering for 2 books whether he was willing to support the New Republic, Talon Karrde seems to be finally coming around to the idea, although he still wants to have his cake and eat it too. In this case being, he wants to get a bunch of smugglers to help him support his push for the New Republic, but he also wants to get paid for it. Leia finally has her twins. Luke is trying to track down where the clones are coming from, and Mara Jade awakens in the Imperial Palace on Coruscant to find that she has been completely out of it for the past month, while her neural pathways were being reconstructed after she ejected herself into an ion blast. So, the Princess Leia costume count. No descriptions of what she's wearing, other than at one point she was wearing a dressing gown, and another point she's wearing a robe and half boots while she runs to a council meeting. Thrawn, is it too much to ask that you just give me a little bit of what I'm asking for, a little bit of descriptions of what Leia's wearing, just because, you know, she seems to be one of the few characters in the original trilogy that very much cares what she's wearing, in that she has multiple costume changes, but I digress. Poor Lando. After the Empire sends a raid on his mining colony in the first book, you'd think that, you know, he's finally caught a break, but since he's been stockpiling metals because the prices were low, they decide to raid him again. That ends up being the catalyst for him coming to Coruscant, to being in the right place at the right time, but I feel a little sad that the plotline of whether he was going to get any help for his mining colony is never resolved, which ties into what I said in the previous video, which is just poor Lando. He's just sent here and there by the vagaries of the plot to do what Thrawn wants him to do. Likewise, Han and Chewie aren't doing a whole lot in this book. They're there on Coruscant, and so they're there to help stop that kidnapping attempt on Leia and her now born twins. And then they get to head off to Wayland with Luke and Lando and Mara. But it's interesting in a way that the plotline they had in the first book, or rather that Han had, trying to get smugglers to come to their side, is fulfilled not by them, but by Talon Karrde. I guess it fits. Talon Karrde's sort of following the Han Solo plotline of a rogue who wants nothing to do with this, is only out for himself, but by the end joins the cause. But I wonder if it might have been a tad more satisfying to have Han involved in that conclusion. He was a smuggler too, and came to the side of the New Republic long, long ago, and I don't know. I'm rambling. I'll cut to something else. I had wondered in the previous video about Rook, how involved he was with the Noghri people, or if he was completely outside of them. And in this book, we got some sort of answer, in that when the Noghri are planning their plot where they were going to move against the Empire, clearly he's involved. He assassinates Thrawn in the end of the book. Which leads me to Thrawn's death scene. I love how it plays out that for all his insight into other people's, that he, in the end, has no insight into his own personal assassin, and that the proximity and trust he gives to him is what, in the end, destroys him. And it's also sad in a way because the Empire is so successful for most of The Last Command, using tricks and knowledge and just plain old guesses to pulverize the New Republic. I love the feint he developed on 2 different planets where it makes it look as though he's firing through a planetary shield, but in fact it's just a cloaked ship on the inside of the shield, and the sheer timing that involves to set that up, like, it's genius. And it's also so sad in a way that there's this genius strategician, but as soon as he dies, Pelayan knows, I'm not that man. I can't do anything like that, and he chooses to retreat rather than try to continue the battle. C'baoth, too, brings up a few interesting points, almost nightmare fuel. Realizing that he has the capability, even for so short a time, to take over the entire crew of the Chimera, thousands and thousands of crew members, is horrifying. And the instance where he makes Pelayan do what he wants and then immediately makes him forget it, it makes you realize how frightening the Jedi could have been to the rest of the galaxy. Obviously, normal galactic citizens had no idea of the Jedi's potential if they're able to slip so easily out of the public conscience and the public memory. But just knowing that C'baoth is capable of that is terrifying. And I think part of the things that Luke struggles with, he wants to bring the Jedi Order back, but knowing that the Jedi Order could be capable of that, could be capable of such monstrosities, is terrifying. In the same way, the complete ruination of General Covell, in that C'baoth tears apart his mind and there's not enough left for him to survive without C'baoth's Force presence, is horrifying and something I don't want to think about. Which leads me into some misgivings I have about the treatment of Mara's fulfillment of the Emperor's last command. The Emperor ordered her at the very moment of his death that she must kill Luke Skywalker. Not, as she finds out, because Luke Skywalker killed him, but as a final revenge against his father. And she fulfills that command by killing Luke's clone, which in the past I was perfectly fine with, but with this reading sat a little off with me. We know so little about the clone Luke, so little about how much of his mind is left and how much of it is just an extension of C'baoth's will, that it worries me in a way that by killing him almost thoughtlessly, Mare is able to remove that from her mind. I more would have wished that it was some conscious mental effort she took, instead of saying, oh, well, you've ordered me to kill him, so I'll kill a version of him, but rather her putting her foot down and saying, no, I won't do this. It's wrong. I don't want to. I refuse to fulfill your last command. I guess it just feels too neat and tidy for her to kill clone Luke. And in a way, him being a clone means that we don't think of any of the repercussions of her just killing a person who, in this instance, probably doesn't have any say in what he does or how he behaves. I don't know, in a way that's nightmare fuel as well. I also think it's interesting that there's two major revelations for Mara. Number one, that she knows where the Emperor's personal secret store world was, and that she was completely unaware that Luke was the son of Darth Vader. And that both of these, in a way, are revelations both to her and to the plot as a whole. When she realizes that there's clones, that Thrawn has found those clone cylinders that the Emperor has hidden, I feel like that's the moment that she entirely decides to side with the New Republic, for better or for worse. In the previous book, she decided that she could not side with Thrawn's empire, but she still wasn't really sure if she wanted to side with the New Republic. But when she realizes that there's the potential for a new Clone Wars, she tells them that she'll do whatever she can. And in a way, I think her realizing that Luke was Vader's son makes her realize how, even in the Emperor's final moments, she was manipulated. That he didn't send her to kill Luke at Jabba's palace because he thought that Luke was conspiring with Vader, but because he wanted to hurt Vader. He wanted to get revenge against Vader. In a way, it was never about Luke at all. It was always about his father. When Card meets with the smugglers, we have a whole two named ladies, which is exciting, you know, in my continuing count of how many named ladies are there in the Thrawn trilogy. So we have Partaw, a Hoden smuggler, and then we have Shada, Mazik's beautiful bodyguard, who will come into much greater importance in the Hand of Thrawn duology. But still, I like seeing a few more ladies. And Winter has a bit more to do in this book, which I enjoyed as well. She's the one that sort of realizes that Mara Jade is not quite what she seems. Of course, at this point, Luke knows that she was the Emperor's hand, but no one else does. And Winter also is a key figure in them finding Delta Source. I really liked how Delta Source worked, because in a way, I agree that it was how the Emperor works. He took something natural, and he perverts it to his use. So finding out that there were no spies in the Imperial Palace or a spy network, but just this passive recording device embedded in these poor trees was satisfying. I also like that we get our first glimpse of some of the other members of Rogue Squadron. We've obviously seen Wedge in all three books, but in this one, we get a little glimpse of Jansen and Hobby, who will get a lot more to do in the X-Wing comics and the X-Wing books, but it was nice to see them, even for a brief time. I also like our first glimpse of the Solo twins, little tiny newborn babies that they are. It's sad in a way what happened to them in the later books, but at this point, they're babies. They're strong in the Force, they're little nuggets of future plot points, and I like seeing them. I also find it interesting how Zahn set up what Mara could be doing in the later books. We get in the final chapter that Talon Karrde wants to set up a Smugglers alliance and needs a liaison to serve between the smugglers and the New Republic, and that's the role they want Mara to fill. In the same way, Luke gives her his old lightsaber that he lost on Cloud City because she's his friend, she helped him, he thinks that she'll need it, she'll use it one day. So we also get the small hint that maybe she's going to become a Jedi as well. It's frustrating in a way that future authors didn't really use her, because for all her faults and Mary Sue qualities, I like her. I feel like you can't say someone's a Mary Sue when they're such a unlikable person. But obviously, everyone has their own darlings, and future books will create future characters to spotlight. So, what faults or little changes would I wish with The Last Command? I said in the last video that Dark Force Rising sort of adhered pretty closely to the beats that Empire Strikes Back was trying to hit. And in a way, I feel like especially the end of The Last Command is trying to hit a lot of the same beats that Return of the Jedi did. We have the team heading off on a mission to blow something up at the same time that some other individuals are heading to the Emperor's throne room where we know there's going to be some sort of lightsaber duel. And there's some facts they need to find out, so there's another group coming to tell the other group something. Lando and Chewie blowing up the cylinders feels a lot like Han and Leia blowing up the bunker on Endor. And in the same way, Luke and Mara facing off against C'baoth feels a lot like Luke facing off against the Emperor. We even have the moment where he, throws his lightsaber away and's like, I'm not going to fight you. In Return of the Jedi, that was him saying, I'm not going to fight you, Father, and then the Emperor starting to, electrocute him. And in this one, it's him, putting his blade away and saying, let everyone go, C'baoth, and I'll come with you. I don't know how I feel about that. I can see that when you're pulling people in from the movies, you sort of want to give them things that are familiar, but at the same time, some of the things I liked the best in the Thrawn trilogy were the things that weren't familiar from the original movies, were things taking a new tack or trying a new direction. In the same way, the thing that annoyed me off and on about Heir to the Empire, the constant references back to the events of the 3 original trilogy movies, is still happening in this one. People are constantly talking about Yavin and Endor and Cloud City, and it's like, God, it's been 5 years! Can't you think of anything else that's happened between then? But on the whole, it moves along quickly, it has a great conclusion, and whatever my niggling doubts about the nightmare fuel lurking below the surface, or some of the plot developments that I wasn't as much a fan of, I still really, really enjoyed this book. And I think it was a fitting and exciting conclusion to the Thrawn trilogy. So next, we'll have to jump back to immediately after Return of the Jedi and see what's happening during the Truce at Bakura.